You know when your own daughter tells you not to come to her wedding, not in person, not on the phone, but through a bland little email, something inside you dies. At first it's a quiet death, just a flicker, like a candle struggling in a draught, but then the silence spreads. Through your chest, through your bones, through your memory, and then comes the echo of everything you ever did for her. Every night you stayed awake, every penny you scraped together, every broken piece of yourself you patched just to keep her whole. My name is Clara Monroe. I'm 58 years old, divorced, and I raised my daughter Lily on my own since she was 5. Her father disappeared after the divorce, physically and emotionally. The kind of man who sends birthday cards without signing them. So I did the rest. I did all of it. School runs, grocery trips, dress fittings, nights she cried over boys who didn't call back, and mornings she swore she hated me because I wouldn't let her go out in a mini skirt at 15. All the things mothers do, all the invisible hours. When Lily told me she was getting married, I was the one who cried. She didn't, she smiled, she was radiant. I thought that was the start of something new, a mother of the bride journey. Champagne tastings, dress shopping, long late, night calls filled with nerves and giddy excitement. But no, that's not what happened. 3 weeks before the wedding, I got an email, no subject line. Just, hey, so, I think it's better if you don't come to the wedding. It's a bit complicated. It'll be live. Streamed though, so you can still watch Red Lily. That was it. No explanation, no voice, no courage, just silence wrapped in HTML. I must have stared at that email for an hour. I read it and reread it until the words blurred, until I couldn't feel my hands, until my breath turned shallow and my ribs started tightening like a fist around my heart. I didn't even cry. Not then. I just sat there at my little kitchen table, in the same house where she took her first steps and lost her first tooth, and screamed that I made the best pancakes in the world. And I asked myself, why? But she didn't pick up when I called. She didn't answer my texts. She blocked me on Facebook. Me, her mother, and the worst part, the wedding was in Paris, a fairy tale wedding in a castle, like venue just outside the city. And I helped pay for it, not all of it, but enough. Enough that my savings account still winces when I check it. Enough that I skipped fixing the roof last winter and drove with a cracked windshield for 5 months. Enough that I said, "Don't worry about the flowers, baby, I've got them." So no, I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't show up uninvited and throw a tantrum in Tull. I simply replied, "Sure, enjoy your big day. I'll be watching." But I wasn't watching. Not on Livestream, not from Google Earth, not from anywhere close. Because while she walked down that aisle in her designer dress, arm in arm with the man she said would love her forever, I was doing something else. Something she never saw coming. Something that made her call me 32 times the very next morning. But I didn't pick up because I was busy teaching her a lesson about silence, about consequences, about what happens when you forget who held you when the whole world turned away. That morning, the phone buzzed endlessly on my kitchen counter, the ringtone sharp, urgent, impossible to ignore. 2 calls in less than 12 hours, each one flashing her name, Lily. The sound of it twisted inside me like a double-edged sword. Part of me wanted to rush to her, to tell her it was okay, that love isn't just about perfect weddings or fairy tales. But the other part, the part that had been bruised and silenced for too long, held me back. I didn't answer. Not once. You see, for years I poured myself into her life like water into a dry vase. I held her when she cried over boyfriends who didn't text back. I wiped her tears when the bullies at school called her names. I stayed awake when she had nightmares. I sacrificed dreams of my own to give her a life where she could dream freely. And yet, in the end, she sent me an email telling me I wasn't even worthy to attend the most important day of her life. I thought about how cold those words felt. Don't come to my wedding. As if all the memories we shared, all the sacrifices, all the love I gave her, could be erased with a few clicks on a keyboard. That night, while the city of Paris glittered with romance and celebration, I sat alone in my small apartment thousands of miles away, replaying every moment, every conversation, every missed call. Every hurtful silence between us, I asked myself, where did we lose each other? Was it me? Was it her? Or was it the silence growing between us like an invisible wall? But then a thought struck me. Maybe this wasn't just about anger or hurt. Maybe this was about reclaiming my voice, about showing my daughter that love isn't a one-way street, that respect has to flow both ways, that the pain of being rejected, even by your own child, isn't something to be hidden or ignored. It's a lesson, a turning point. So I planned my next move carefully, not out of spite, but out of quiet strength. I reached out to the wedding planner, the one who coordinated every detail of Lily's dream day. I didn't tell them who I was, just that I had a special request, a small but meaningful one. I asked them to include a surprise during the reception, something that would remind everyone, especially Lily, of the woman who sacrificed everything for that day to happen. The planner was hesitant at first, but intrigued. I sent them a heartfelt letter, not for Lily to read immediately, but to be shared with all the guests. A story of love, loss, and the silent battles fought behind every perfect smile. I wanted the wedding to be beautiful, yes, but also unforgettable, not just for the bride and groom, but for everyone who witnessed it. Meanwhile, the live stream continued. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the vows whispered under the Parisian sky. But behind the scenes, a ripple was forming the quiet revolution that would turn the day upside down. The next morning, my phone exploded with calls, messages, texts, frantic, desperate. Lily wanted to know if I had seen the surprise. She wanted to talk. She wanted to fix things, but I remained silent. Because sometimes the loudest message is the one you don't say at all. I wasn't the woman who would cry in the corner. I was the woman who would rise with dignity, grace, and a truth that no email could ever erase. And this was just the beginning of our story. That quiet morning after the wedding, as sunlight poured through my window, I sat sipping coffee and scrolling through the flood of messages from Lily. Her words were frantic, raw, a mix of regret, confusion, and desperation. She wrote about how she'd never meant to hurt me, how the email was sent in a moment of anger, how she wished I could understand what she was going through. But deep down, beneath the trembling lines of apology, I sensed something else, fear of facing the consequences of her actions, of confronting the truth she'd long buried. I hadn't answered any of her calls yet. I let the phone sit silent beside me, the screen lighting up with every attempt she made to reach out. I wasn't ready. I needed time to breathe, to collect myself, to process the storm that had torn through my heart. Because this wasn't just about an uninvited wedding. It was about a lifetime of misunderstandings, unspoken words, and wounds that never had the chance to heal. For years, I had played the role of the perfect mother, the one who never complained, who swallowed her own pain to make room for her daughter's happiness. But in doing so, I had lost sight of myself. I had let my own needs, my own voice, be silenced beneath the weight of sacrifice. And now that silence had fractured the very bond I treasured most. I thought back to Lily's childhood, the bright-eyed girl who used to sneak into my bed on stormy nights, who drew crayon pictures of our family that hung crooked on the fridge, who whispered secrets only a mother could understand. How had we drifted so far apart? The surprise at the wedding had been a subtle one, carefully woven into the evening's program. During the reception, as the guests settled in for dinner, a video played on the grand screen, a montage of memories stitched together with tender music and heartfelt narration. It was my voice speaking directly to Lily, telling the story of a mother's love, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices made in silence, the unwavering hope for her happiness. As the images flickered, baby pictures, birthday parties, school plays, late-night talks, the room grew still. Some guests wiped away tears. Others sat frozen, caught in the unexpected intimacy of the moment. And when my final words echoed through the hall, thanking everyone for sharing in Lily's special day and asking her to remember where she came from, a hush fell over the crowd. Lily was visibly shaken, her eyes glistened, and she covered her mouth with trembling hands. That night, she texted me, raw and vulnerable, a stark contrast to the cold email she had sent days before. "I'm sorry, Mom. I never meant to hurt you. Can we talk? But healing isn't instant. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight." So I waited, not out of spite, but because some wounds need time to mend before they can truly heal. That's when I realized something powerful. Revenge doesn't always have to be loud or angry. Sometimes it's quiet, patient, rooted in self-respect and the courage to stand your ground. And this was my revenge. Not to punish, but to remind. Not to break, but to awaken. Because no matter how far apart we seemed, the bond between a mother and daughter is never truly broken. It only waits for a chance to be rediscovered. Days turned into weeks, and the silence between Lily and me stretched longer than either of us expected. The flood of messages slowed, the calls stopped, and with that pause came a strange kind of space, a quiet room where thoughts could settle, where feelings could breathe without the pressure to react immediately. I spent those days reflecting on everything we'd been through together. The tough times, like when she got suspended from school and I had to hold her accountable, even when it broke my heart. The beautiful times, her graduation, the day she got her first job, the nights we spent talking for hours about her dreams and fears. I remembered the warmth of her laughter, the softness in her voice when she called me Mom after a long day. But I also remembered the fractures, the moments I didn't listen enough, the times I was too tired or too overwhelmed to be patient, the arguments that left both of us feeling unheard and alone. I realized that love, no matter how deep, isn't always enough to bridge the gap between two people unless it's met with understanding on both sides. One afternoon, I received a package in the mail. No return address, no note, just a small box wrapped carefully in brown paper. My hands trembled as I opened it, revealing a delicate necklace with a tiny heart pendant inside. It was simple, elegant, and unmistakably familiar. Lily's handwriting scrawled across a small card read, "For when you're ready, I love you." Tears welled up in my eyes, not just because of the gift, but because it was a sign, a small thread of hope, a bridge reaching out from the other side of the silence. I called her that evening. My heart pounded as I waited for her to answer, afraid of rejection but needing to hear her voice. When she finally picked up, her voice was soft, tentative. "Mom," she whispered. "Hi, Lily," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I got your necklace, thank you." There was a pause, then a shaky breath. "I want to talk, really talk. No emails, no texts, just you and me." And so we began, slowly, carefully, peeling back the layers of pain, misunderstanding, and regret. We talked about the wedding, about the reasons behind her harsh words, about my silence and her fear. We shared stories we'd never told anyone else. We cried, we laughed. We found pieces of each other again. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick, but it was real, and in that process I learned something profound. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't about getting even. It's about rising above the hurt, reclaiming your dignity, and creating a space where broken hearts can begin to heal. Because in the end, forgiveness isn't just for the other person, it's for yourself. And this was my story. A story of love lost, lessons learned, and the quiet strength it takes to say, I'm still here. Weeks turned into months, and with every conversation, every shared silence, Lily and I began to rebuild something fragile yet precious, a new foundation for our relationship. It wasn't the perfect mothered, otter bond I had once dreamed of, nor was it without its cracks, but it was honest and it was ours. One chilly evening, a few months after the wedding, she called me just before bedtime. Her voice carried a vulnerability I hadn't heard in a long time. "Mom, I want you to know something," she said softly. "That day in Paris, when I sent that email, I was scared. Scared you wouldn't understand me, scared I'd lose you if I told you the truth. But I realize now that shutting you out hurt us both." I listened quietly, my heart aching with a mixture of sorrow and hope. It was the kind of confession that only comes after deep reflection, a sign that maybe, just maybe, healing was truly beginning. We talked for hours that night about everything we'd left unsaid, my fears as a mother, her struggles to find her own identity, the weight of expectations that had silenced us both. And as the night grew deeper, I realized that this journey wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about rediscovery. Rediscovering who Lily was as a woman, beyond the daughter I'd raised. Rediscovering who I was beyond the sacrifices and silent battles. Rediscovering the delicate threads of love that still connected us, despite everything. I shared with her my own regrets, the times I wished I had been more patient or more present. She shared her pain, the moments she felt unseen or unheard. We shed the armor we'd built to protect ourselves, and in that vulnerability, we found strength. The necklace she'd sent me became a symbol not just of apology, but of a promise. A promise to keep trying, to keep listening, to keep loving, even when it's hard. Our story didn't end with that wedding. It was just another chapter, one marked not by grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but by quiet understanding and the willingness to face the past together. And as I sit here now, sharing this with you, I know that sometimes the greatest revenge is not in retaliation, but in resilience, in choosing love over bitterness, hope over despair. Because at the end of the day, family isn't about perfection. It's about showing up even when it's painful, even when you're not sure if you'll be welcomed. I'm still here. And so is she, and maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Months passed, and with each passing day, the fragile threads weaving Lily and me back together grew stronger. Our conversations, once stilted and guarded, became moments of genuine connection, rich with unspoken understanding and newfound respect. It wasn't about erasing the past or pretending the wounds didn't exist. No, it was about accepting the scars, honoring the pain, and choosing to move forward despite it all. I remember one late afternoon when we sat across from each other at a small cafe, sunlight filtering through the windows, casting soft glows on her face. Lily reached across the table, her hand trembling slightly as it found mine. "Mom," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "thank you for not giving up on me." Those words hit me like a bomb on a wound I hadn't realized was still raw. All those sleepless nights, all the sacrifices, the heartbreaks, they weren't in vain. Despite the harsh email, despite the cold shoulder, despite the silence that had stretched between us like a chasm, love had endured. That day I understood something vital, that love is not a guarantee of smooth paths or perfect moments. It's a choice. A daily, sometimes difficult choice to keep believing, to keep hoping, to keep forgiving. I also realized how much I had changed. No longer the woman who silently bore the pain, I had found my voice. Not just for Lily, but for myself. My story, our story, was no longer one of quiet suffering but of strength and grace. And while the wedding in Paris was a painful chapter, it was also a turning point. A moment where silence was broken, where walls began to crumble, and where a mother and daughter began to find their way back to each other. So here I am, sharing this story not just as a tale of heartbreak or revenge, but as a testament to resilience, to the power of love that refuses to fade, even when tested by distance, hurt, and misunderstanding. If there's one thing I want you to take away from my journey, it's this. No matter how broken a relationship seems, no matter how deep the wounds, there is always hope. There is always a chance for healing, for reconnection, for new beginnings, because love, real love, is worth fighting for. And sometimes, the strongest revenge is simply to keep loving, to keep showing up and to never give up. Over the months that followed, I found myself reflecting deeply, not just on my relationship with Lily, but on who I was as a woman, a mother, and a person. The pain of that email, the sting of rejection, had forced me to confront parts of myself I had long ignored. The quiet sacrifices, the silent endurance, they were only half the story. I realized that to truly heal, I needed to reclaim my own identity beyond being just mom. So I began to take small steps toward rediscovering who Clara Monroe was outside the roles and expectations that had defined me for decades. I enrolled in art classes, something I'd loved as a girl but abandoned in the chaos of motherhood. I reconnected with old friends who reminded me of the woman I used to be, the one who laughed easily and dreamed boldly. And most importantly, I began to set boundaries, learning that love does not mean losing yourself. Lily noticed the change too. Our conversations shifted from painful memories to hopeful plans. We spoke of vacations, of holidays we'd missed, of books to read and movies to watch together. She told me about her fears, her doubts about marriage, and the pressures she felt trying to live up to an image of perfection. I listened, truly listened, without judgment. One evening, we sat together on my worn-out couch, sharing a bottle of wine and stories from our past. She reached out and held my hand, her eyes shining with tears. "Mom, thank you for fighting for us," she said. "I'm sorry for shutting you out. I was scared, but I'm ready now to be your daughter, not just the girl you raised." And in that moment, I realized that revenge had transformed. It was no longer about punishment or resentment. It was about healing, growth, and the unbreakable bond between mother and daughter. Our journey wasn't perfect, and it never would be, but it was real, and it was ours. So if you're listening to my story, know this. Sometimes the hardest battles are fought in silence, and sometimes the most powerful victories come not from revenge, but from love, steady, patient, and enduring, because in the end, that's what truly matters. And that's the legacy I hope to leave. The seasons changed, and so did we. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at times, the walls built from years of silence and misunderstanding began to crumble. Our relationship wasn't restored in a day or even in a month, but through countless small moments of grace, honesty, and patience. We learned how to listen without judgment, how to speak without blame, and how to simply be present for each other, even in the uncomfortable spaces where old wounds still throbbed. I began to understand that the hurt I felt after that cold email wasn't just about the wedding or the exclusion. It was about a deeper fear, the fear that my love had been taken for granted, that my sacrifices had been invisible. But as we peeled back the layers of our fractured bond, I realized that Lily's harshness was also a cry for connection, a shield against vulnerability, and a reflection of her own struggles to find her place in a world that often felt too big and unforgiving. Together, we started to rewrite our story. We embraced the messy, imperfect nature of family, the arguments that lead to understanding, the silences that make space for healing, the tears that break down walls and build bridges. And through it all, I found a new strength inside myself, not the quiet endurance of before, but a fierce, unshakable confidence rooted in love and truth. One afternoon, as we sat in the garden of my home, watching the light dance through the leaves, Lily turned to me and said, "Mom, I don't want to live in the shadow of that day anymore. I want to create new memories, ones that aren't weighed down by past mistakes." I smiled, feeling a warmth that reached deep into my soul. "Me too, sweetheart, me too." And so we moved forward imperfectly, but together. This is my story. Not just of rejection and revenge, but of rediscovery, forgiveness, and the quiet power of love that refuses to give up. Because sometimes the greatest victory isn't about getting even. It's about rising above the pain, embracing the scars, and choosing to love anyway. I'm still here, and so is she. And that's all that matters. As time went on, the small moments between Lily and me began to accumulate into something larger. A fragile but real bridge spanning the distance that had grown between us. It wasn't always easy. There were days when old wounds reopened, when frustration bubbled up, and when the weight of years felt too heavy to bear. But each time we chose to return to the conversation, to try again, to listen a little deeper. I learned that forgiveness is not a single act but a continuous journey, one that requires courage, humility, and above all, love. It means holding space for the pain without letting it define you. It means letting go of expectations, and it means embracing vulnerability as a strength rather than a weakness. Lily and I began creating new traditions, simple rituals that helped us reconnect. Sunday morning coffee dates, sharing favorite books and music, sending each other photos of little moments from our days. We laughed more, and the silences between us grew softer, less charged with hurt. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, Lily reached for my hand. "Mom," she said quietly, "thank you for never giving up on me, even when I pushed you away. I'm learning how to be the daughter you deserve." Those words settled in my heart like a gentle rain, nourishing the roots of our renewed bond. It wasn't about forgetting the past, but about choosing to grow beyond it. In the quiet aftermath of that painful wedding and the long months of silence that followed, we found something unexpected: hope. Hope that even fractured relationships can be mended, that love can heal the deepest wounds, and that sometimes the most powerful revenge is the grace we give ourselves and each other. So if you find yourself standing where I once stood, hurt, betrayed, and uncertain, know this: you are not alone. Healing is possible, love is resilient, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to keep showing up. Because in the end, it's not about the past we can't change, but the future we choose to build, and that future is still unwritten. Years later, as I look back on that painful chapter of my life, I realize it was not just about a wedding or an email, it was a reckoning. A moment that forced both Lily and me to confront truths we had long avoided. It was the breaking point that led to the building of something stronger, more honest, and more deeply rooted in understanding. Our relationship is still a work in progress, sometimes messy, sometimes challenging, but always real. We've learned to navigate the complicated dance of mother and daughter with grace, recognizing that love isn't always neat or easy, but it's always worth the effort. Through the ups and downs, the tears and laughter, I discovered a new kind of strength within myself, one that comes not from control or sacrifice, but from vulnerability and acceptance. I learned that being a mother isn't about perfection, it's about presence. It's about showing up even when it's hard, even when you feel unseen. And Lily, in her own way, has grown too. She's learning to carry her own burdens with courage and to embrace the imperfect beauty of family. If there's one truth I want to share, it's this. Love is messy, complicated, and sometimes painful, but it's also transformative. It has the power to heal wounds we never thought would close, and to build bridges where walls once stood. That email, that cold, distant message, was a moment of heartbreak, but it was also the beginning of a new chapter. One where forgiveness took root, where voices were finally heard, and where two hearts slowly found their way back to each other. So, if you're listening, know this. No matter how far you've drifted from someone you love, no matter how deep the hurt, there's always hope for reconciliation. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't about getting even. It's about rising, healing, and choosing love again and again. Because love, in its purest form, is the most powerful force of all. As the years passed, the wounds from that day softened, not erased, but transformed into reminders of how far we had come. Lily and I continued to rebuild, brick by brick, learning to forgive not just each other, but ourselves. We understood that love is not a perfect fairy tale, but a story of persistence, patience, and grace. We celebrated birthdays and holidays together, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes joyfully, always with a sense of gratitude that we had found each other again. Our conversations deepened, and the walls of silence that once separated us gave way to laughter, shared memories, and plans for the future. I often think back to that cold email, the moment that felt like the end, but was really a beginning. A catalyst that forced us to face the fractures in our relationship and confront the pain we long ignored. It taught me that silence can be louder than words, that absence can teach presence, and that sometimes the greatest lessons come wrapped in heartbreak. Through it all, I learned the true meaning of strength, not in anger or revenge, but in vulnerability and forgiveness. In choosing love over bitterness, hope over despair, and connection over isolation. This is my story. A story of a mother and daughter torn apart by silence, only to find their way back through honesty, courage, and unyielding love. If you take anything from this, let it be this. No matter how deep the wounds, no matter how cold the distance, love has the power to heal, to restore, and to renew. And sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply to keep loving, even when it feels impossible, because love is not just what we give. It's what we hold on to, what we fight for, and what ultimately saves us. I'm still here, and so is she. And that's the greatest victory of all. As I close this chapter of my story, I want you to understand something deeply. Life doesn't always give us the endings we expect. Sometimes the people we love hurt us in ways we never imagined. Sometimes the silence between us feels like an endless chasm. But even in the darkest moments, there is a spark, a flicker of hope, a chance for healing, a way forward. My journey with Lily taught me that forgiveness isn't a weakness. It's the greatest strength we possess. That love in all its messy, imperfect glory is worth fighting for every single day. That the wounds we carry can become the bridges we build. I don't know what the future holds for us, and maybe some scars will never fully fade. But I do know this. I am proud of how far we've come. Proud that we chose to speak, to listen, to try again. Proud that, despite everything, love won. So if you're sitting there, holding on to pain, feeling lost or rejected, remember, you are not alone. Healing takes time. Relationships take work. But love, real love, is resilient. And sometimes the most powerful revenge is not in what you do to others, but in what you do for yourself. You rise, you forgive, you love, and that, more than anything else, changes everything. Thank you for listening to my story. May it inspire you to hold on to hope, to find your voice, and to never give up on the ones you love.